10 WCW gimmicks WWE straight up ripped off. Gillberg, WWE's Gillberg, was perhaps one of the most obvious and funniest mockeries in wrestling history. The parody was aimed squarely at WCW's unstoppable force, Goldberg, who at the time was tearing through opponents with a record 173 match winning streak. WWE's version, they flipped the concept entirely, giving Gillberg an embarrassing losing streak of the exact same number. Instead of pyrotechnics that roared into the arena, Gillberg's entrance featured cheap handheld sparklers, a fire extinguisher spraying like a dying fog machine, and entrance music that sounded more like a high school football warm-up than a war march. Fans knew immediately that this wasn't about creating a credible threat, it was about poking fun. Dwayne Gill leaned into the role brilliantly, flexing his skinny frame, struggling to look intimidating, and delivering comically slow spears. The parody worked so well because it was unapologetic. WCW had their monster, WWE had their mosquito, and every time Gillberg waddled to the ring, fans knew they were in for a laugh. It was one of those rare instances where a ripoff was done intentionally to lampoon, not to compete. And in that sense, Gillberg might have been the most successful Goldberg imitation of all time. Shockmaster's legacy echoed. If you know wrestling lore, you know the Shockmaster. His WCW debut is etched into infamy. Bursting through a wall, tripping over his own was supposed to be a dramatic powerhouse reveal. What fans got was a comedy of errors. WWE didn't just ignore this. It recycled the clumsy masked enforcer idea in various gimmicks over the years. You'd see big men given ridiculous props, awkward masks, and over-the-top entrances doomed to fail. Think about Mantar, or the Goon different outfits. Same, how is this guy supposed to be scary? In a way, WWE kept the Shockmaster's spirit alive, whether by accident or design. Every time a towering wrestler in an elaborate getup botched their entrance or cut a bad promo, you could almost hear echoes of that 1993 night. And while WCW's original was pure unplanned disaster, WWE took the basic big guy in silly gear who trips on his own hype concept and turned it into a repeatable gag. Some would call it an homage, others are a curse. Either way, the Shockmaster's shadow, should I say helmet, still looms large. Razor and Road Warriors parody. WWE has never been shy about pushing knockoffs when it suits them, and the fake Razor, Ramon, and Diesel angle in 1996 might be the most blatant. After Scott Hall and Kevin Nash jumped ship to WCW, WWE simply cast new guys in their roles and pretended nothing happened. It was like recasting James Bond without telling anyone. Fans saw right through it, but that was the point. It was a jab at WCW for stealing their stars. But this approach wasn't limited to singles competitors. WWE also dipped into tag team mimicry, borrowing aesthetics, names, and styles from popular WCW duos. The fake LOD knockoffs and other short-lived lookalikes tried to capture the magic of the originals without actually having the same charisma, chemistry, or drawing power. Sure, it was cheap, but it created buzz. People tuned in just to see how bad or bizarre these replacements were. And in wrestling, sometimes so bad it's good is still a win. Whether you laughed, groaned, or just sat there shaking your head, WWE's parody streak was undeniable. In the end, it wasn't about fooling anyone, it was about reminding fans that WWE could troll just as hard as WCW could. Tribute to the NWO, and then some. When WCW unleashed the New World Order in 1996, it was like setting off a creative nuke in the wrestling world. The NWO wasn't just a faction, it was an anti-establishment movement that blurred the lines between storyline and reality. WWE's response? D-Generation X. Sure, DX had their own unique brand of rebellious humor, crotch chops, innuendos, wild antics, but the DNA of the NWO was all over it. Both groups were cocky, anti-authority, and constantly breaking the fourth wall. Both loved interrupting matches, spray painting things, and making management look foolish. The difference? DX leaned into raunchy comedy, while NWO stayed more gang warfare cool. Yet it's impossible to ignore how quickly DX appeared after the NWO's success. WWE took WCW's formula and cranked it up to an R-rated level, knowing their audience was hungry for edgy content. And while NWO's black and white style oozed menace, DX brought neon green chaos. The rivalry between the two groups, even across company lines, became a fan-fueled debate. Which was better? Which changed wrestling more? But one thing is clear. Without NWO's blueprint, DX may never have existed in the form we know today. At number 5, we have APA versus Crony K. The Acolytes Protection Agency Bradshaw and Farouk were WWE's bar-brawling, cigar-smoking mercenaries for hire. They'd sit at a backstage poker table, accept payment for protection, and then destroy whoever needed destroying. WCW saw this and decided they could match it. Enter Crony K Brian Adams and Brian Clark tag team with a similar hired muscle vibe, complete with intimidating stares, black gear, and power moves. The difference: while APA had comedic charm and could work a match with crowd engagement, Crony K often came off as a more serious but less entertaining version. The irony is that when WCW folded, WWE brought Crony K in only to have them face The Undertaker and Kane in a match so poor it became legendary for all the wrong reasons. But the influence loop was clear. WWE inspired WCW's Chronic, and then WCW's creation ended up in WWE, where it fizzled. It's a prime example of the creative ping pong these companies played. When one had a hit, the other tried to one-up it, but lightning rarely struck twice. Still, for a brief moment, both APA and Crony K embodied that late 90s wrestling trope: big guys, minimal nonsense, maximum damage. The Juice channeling The Rock. Juventud Guerrera was already a talented cruiserweight in WCW, known for his high-flying style and charisma, but when he started calling himself The Juice, it was impossible to miss the reference. This wasn't about an orange drink, it was about The Rock. Guerrera began cutting promos with eyebrow raises, catchphrases that sounded suspiciously familiar, and a swagger that mirrored the Great One. He even sprinkled in mannerisms like pausing mid-sentence for crowd reactions and using signature taunts before hitting moves. It was a parody with a touch of ambition, because Guerrera could actually wrestle at a level The Rock never attempted. The gimmick was short-lived, but it stood out as one of WCW's most obvious nods to WWE superstardom. Fans either loved it as a cheeky tribute or rolled their eyes at the blatant imitation. In the grand scheme, it didn't hurt Guerrera's reputation. If anything, it got him more mic time and character focus. But it also proved that in the Monday Night Wars, even your personality traits weren't safe from being borrowed by the competition. Horace Hogan equals Austin 2.0. Horace Hogan had one big advantage in WCW. He was Hulk Hogan's nephew. But family ties can only get you so far, so WCW decided to give him a makeover. Out went the generic gear, in came the bald head, goatee, leather vest, and an aggressive brawling style. Sound familiar? It was basically Steve Austin's whole look and attitude. The problem? Horace didn't have Austin's charisma, promo skills, or crowd connection. What WCW hoped would be their own Stone Cold came off more like lukewarm Horace. He'd stomp mud holes, glare at the camera, and try to carry that anti-authority edge, but it always felt forced. This was a case where the copy highlighted how hard the original was to replicate. Austin's appeal wasn't just in the costume, it was in the authenticity. Horace could mimic the motions, but he couldn't bottle the magic. Still, as far as visual ripoffs go, this one was bold. Anyone flipping channels in 1999 might have done a double take thinking Austin had jumped ship, only to realize it was a Hogan family side project. The Giant, Andre's kiddo. Before Paul White became WWE's Big Show, he was WCW's The Giant billed as the son of Andre the Giant. It was a total fabrication, but WCW leaned into it hard. He wore gear reminiscent of Andre, used similar slow, powerful moves, and even adopted that same looming silent aura during early promos. The idea was to give fans a sense of nostalgia while introducing a new monster heel. And to be fair, it worked. The Giant made an immediate impact. The Andre's son gimmick was a direct emotional play, borrowing credibility from WWE's beloved legend. When White eventually jumped to WWE, they dropped the storyline entirely, but kept much of the presentation just rebranded. It's one of those instances where the copycat act actually evolved into something bigger. Still, it's hard not to look back and see the gimmick for what it was, a shortcut to instant fan investment. Asha vs. China Redux. When China exploded in WWE as the 9th wonder of the world, she broke barriers for women in wrestling, taking on men, winning championships, and redefining what female performers could be. WCW's answer? Asha. Even the name was a play on China, both being large landmasses. Asha's presentation mirrored China's almost exactly black leather gear, imposing physique, and a no-nonsense attitude in the ring. She'd overpower male wrestlers, act as an enforcer for factions, and stand unflinching in the face of larger opponents. But the timing made it obvious this wasn't a coincidence. It was competition. The problem was that while Chyna had years of character development and crowd connection, Aja was dropped into the spotlight without the same build-up. Fans saw the similarities immediately and labeled her a copycat. Still, she did carve out her own moments in WCW, even if the Gimmicks' origins were a little too transparent. Oklahoma gets poked again. When WCW introduced Oklahoma, it was a parody of WWE commentator Jim Ross, complete with exaggerated southern drawl, BBQ sauce references, and even mockery of Ross's real-life Bell's palsy, move many fans saw as crossing the line. WWE, for its part, has also taken its shots at announcers over the years, turning beloved voices into punchlines for cheap heat. Michael Cole, Howard Finkel, and even JR himself have been used in angles where they're humiliated or physically attacked. The idea of making an announcer the butt of the joke is hardly exclusive to WCW, but Oklahoma remains one of the most infamous cases. The fact that WWE has occasionally played in the same sandbox, albeit usually with less mean-spirited execution, just shows that no role in wrestling is safe from being turned into an angle. Parody can be fun when it's lighthearted. When it punches down, it tends to leave a bad taste. WWE and WCW weren't just competing, they were mirroring, mocking, and one-upping each other at every turn. Gimmicks crossed company lines, sometimes as tribute, sometimes as parody, and sometimes as straight-up theft. For fans, it made the Monday Night Wars unforgettable. Which copycat moment still sticks out to you? Drop your pick and I'll catch you in the next breakdown.